What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. This isn't my scariest story, but trust me, it's definitely a wild ride. Let's dive into Scary Haunted House. The house was huge, but not in a good way. It had dark, gloomy rooms and hallways that never seemed to end. Every step echoed off the cold, bare walls, and the dim lighting only made the shadows stretch farther, as if they were alive. The ceilings were high but oppressive, making you feel small and unwelcome. Dust hung in the air like a forgotten memory, and the silence was so heavy, it pressed against your ears. Doors creaked, even when no one touched them, and the chill in the air never went away, no matter how many layers you wore. It wasn't just a house. It was a place that felt like it had never known warmth or laughter. The paint on the walls was peeling away to reveal the rotten wood underneath. Long, curling strips hung like dead skin, and when touched, they crumbled to dust. The exposed wood was damp and discolored, streaked with years of neglect and the slow, creeping advance of decay. In some places, mold had begun to take hold, dark splotches spreading like a sickness. The smell of mildew lingered in the air, mixing with the musty scent of old wallpaper and forgotten memories. Every surface seemed to whisper of things left undone, of time passing without care or presence. Everything was old and worn out, like nothing had been used or touched in years. The furniture sagged under its own weight, covered in layers of dust so thick they seemed permanent. The curtains were faded and threadbare, barely hanging on to rusted rods, swaying slightly with every draft that crept through the cracked windows. Even the air felt ancient, heavy, stale, and unmoved. Light switches clicked uselessly, and the few lamps that still stood were tilted, their shades torn or missing. Rugs were threadbare and moth-eaten, clinging stubbornly to warped floorboards. It was as if time had stopped here long ago, and no one had dared disturb the silence since. The only things that were new were the cobwebs. They were everywhere. They clung to the corners of the ceilings like drapes of neglect, stretched across doorways like forgotten warnings. Fine strands shimmered in the dim light, delicate but unnervingly persistent, as if the house itself was being slowly claimed by spiders. They filled the gaps between cracked picture frames, draped over furniture, and hung like curtains over broken windows. Every step stirred them into motion, threads catching on your skin and clothes, making it feel like the house was trying to hold you back, to keep you tangled in its web of abandonment and decay. There were giant webs in every corner and even in the closets. Thick, tangled masses of silk clung to the walls and ceilings like nests, pulsing slightly in the draft as if alive. It felt like every time I took a step, something would fall on me. A loose strand brushing my face, or worse, the soft skittering thud of something small and many-legged dropping from above. The closets were worse. Opening one was like stepping into a trap, the webs so dense they resisted movement, clinging to my arms and face like glue. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, not by a person, but by the countless unseen things that had made this place their home. And when it did, it sounded like screams in the silence. The reason why we went here is because my brother and his friend dared each other to spend a night in this house alone. Of course, they didn't. They went home after about 30 minutes of being there. But my parents said that we should go check it out. My mom wanted to see if there was any damage to the house from the squatters, and my dad wanted to make sure that no animals had made a nest inside. We got closer to the house, and the stranger things started to happen. First, the wind picked up and the trees started to shake violently, even though there weren't any clouds in the sky. Then the temperature dropped so fast that I could feel my breath on my fingers. All of a sudden, it started to rain heavily, and thick, dark clouds covered the sun. We finally reached the front door, and my mom tried to open it, but it was locked. We walked around the side of the house to find an unlocked window and climbed through it. Inside, everything was pitch black, so we turned on our flashlights and began to explore. The first room we came across was the living room. It was a large room with a fireplace on one wall and a staircase leading to the second floor on the other. The room was empty except for a rocking chair in the corner. As we approached the chair, it began to rock slowly back and forth. My mom screamed and ran to hide behind me. Then the rocking became faster and more violent. The flashlight fell from my hand, and I watched in terror as the chair began to move towards me. I don't remember what happened next. I think I fainted because the next thing I remember is waking up on the floor with my mom kneeling over me asking if I was okay. We ran out of the house as fast as we could. My mom kept telling me that it was all in my head, that there was no way that a chair could move by itself. But I knew what I saw. I refused to believe that she was right. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the events in my mind over and over again. I couldn't believe that my mom didn't see the chair moving. I was sure that I wasn't making it up. The next day, I convinced my dad to come with me when I went back to the house. He agreed and we set off to investigate the rocking chair. When we entered the living room, the chair was in the exact same position as we left it. My dad told me to sit in the chair so that he could see if it moved. I hesitated for a moment, but then sat down. Dad turned off the light and closed the door. I heard a loud noise behind me and I froze. I slowly turned my head towards the sound and saw my dad standing in the corner with a wild look on his face. He was pointing at the door, and his eyes were wide with fear. "Get out," he whispered urgently. "Now." I didn't want to argue, so I just stood up and walked out of the house. I looked back at my dad, but he was gone. I called out to him, but he didn't answer. I raced upstairs to find him, but he wasn't there either. I checked every room until I found him in the attic. He was standing in front of the window, staring out into the darkness. "Dad, are you okay?" I asked. "Did you see him?" he replied, still staring out the window. "See what?" I pressed. He turned to me, his eyes filled with terror. "Don't ever go in that house again," he said, his voice shaking. "You almost died in there. I could feel your soul leaving your body. You have to stay away from that place." I was scared, but I was also confused. What did he mean? Was my dad crazy? I mean, I didn't see anything up in the attic. It was just an old house with some junk in it. But the way my dad reacted, it was like he had seen something horrible. I decided to drop it and never mention the house again. I didn't want to risk seeing whatever it was that my dad had seen. Years passed and I eventually forgot about the incident until one day when I was going through my dad's things after he passed away. I found a box labeled Anna's house. I was curious, so I opened it. Inside, I found a journal. I began to read and realized it was my dad's journal, and the entries were about Anna's house. He had written about how he and my mom had gone to investigate the house and how he had seen something terrifying in the attic. He had drawn a picture of it, but it was too dark to make out any details. He had written that it was a demon and that it had tried to possess me. He had also written that the house was haunted and that we should never go back. I was scared, but I was also determined to find out the truth. I decided to go back to the house and see for myself if it was haunted. When I arrived, it was dark and stormy, just like the day that my dad had seen the demon. I could feel my heart beating in my chest as I walked up the path to the front door. The wind was howling and the rain was pouring. When I knocked, I could hear my own scream echoing back at me. Taking a deep breath, I reached out and pushed the door open. Inside, everything was dark and silent. I could feel the weight of the darkness pressing down on me. As I began to explore the house, I could feel a presence with me at all times. It was as if someone was watching me from the shadows. I went upstairs to the attic, where my dad had seen the demon. I could feel the darkness here was thicker than downstairs. As I turned to leave, I saw it. Standing in the corner of the room was a dark, shadowy figure. It was tall and thin, and it seemed to be made of smoke and darkness. It began to move towards me, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I turned and ran, and I could hear its footsteps behind me. I ran down the stairs and out of the house. As I stood there catching my breath, I could feel the darkness from the house reaching out to me, trying to pull me back inside. I knew I had to get away from the house, so I turned and ran. I ran as fast as I could, and I could hear the darkness screaming behind me, but I didn't dare look back. I knew that if I did, it would reach out and drag me back into the house. I finally stopped running and plopped down in my car, totally out of breath. I got inside and locked the doors, and I could feel the darkness pressing against the car, trying to break in. I started the engine and drove away as fast as I could. In the rearview mirror, I could see the house. It was dark and looming in the distance, and I could feel the darkness rising from it, reaching out to me. I knew that I had escaped its grasp, but I could also feel its presence following me. waiting for me to make a mistake. To this day, I can still feel the presence of the darkness from Anna's house following me. I know that if I ever let my guard down, it will strike. I'm always looking over my shoulder, waiting for it to catch me. And I can still hear its footsteps behind me, whispering my name. And that is my story. If you liked it, please smash the like button. If you want to hear more, then stay tuned for more content. I'll see you next time. Bye.